Carolyn. I'm always bad at doing that. So let me pull up the outline document. So let me make it a little bit bigger. So in terms of sort of flow or format for the document, this is what I'm suggesting, and then I'll sort of walk you through what it might look like. But I'm suggesting, and I want to get your sense on if we want a message from someone sort of at the beginning of the document, and if so, who it would be. Like, would it be you as the coordinating committee? Would it be from the warden and the mayors? Would it be from the CAOs? But just a sense of if we do want to have sort of an opening message to the plan, who that might come from, and or if you want one. That then we'd have a one-pager just giving some key demographic indicators, which sort of lays the context from a data perspective around sort of who you are as a community and communities. Then do a little bit of an overview around community safety and wellbeing in general. So give the framework and talk about sort of the why you're doing it. Then do a bit around the approach that we took. So with the coordinating committee, the advisory committee, and then the different phases that we went through. And I'll show you a little bit around some of the information that might go in there. Then we'd actually present the community safety and wellbeing plan. So give a list of the 5 priority areas, talk a bit about the implementation structure, and then have a one-page for each of the priority areas, which would show who's going to lead the priority area. Oops, what did we hear about it? So that's one of them. And then what will be the focus in the area, so the goals and objectives for the 3-year plan. Then just a little piece around moving forward, and if we want to do any acknowledgements sort of at the end of the plan. Are there any overall comments around sort of that kind of flow? Is there anything else you were thinking of? And or if we want to go back to, do we want a message at the beginning? People's thoughts on that as sort of a starting point for a format or structure for the plan? Do you want me to walk you through it so you can sort of see what it might look like in terms of content? Well, why don't we do that? That might get you more settled into it. Let me push you back over there for a minute. Okay. So you see a message. Do we want a message? If so, who might it be from? That then we give, and I don't have the data in yet, but this would be sort of the data where we do a one-page, population, how many males, females, just give sort of a sense of Elmer, Elgin, St. Thomas from a demographic look. So I laughed this morning because I did my census this morning. I'm like, oh, a year from now, that will all be very different. But just put a little bit of that piece into it. That then the next piece would give an introduction to community safety and well-being. So just talk about, how it came from the province and the chiefs of police, and that it's broader than safety. So it's just really like, why are we doing it? With sort of the mandatory pieces that you have to do. You had to prepare it, you had to work in partnership with the advisory committee, you had to do consultations. And then putting that Ontario framework in place, which is the circles that we've been working with in terms of the 4 areas of focus for the community safety and wellbeing plan. So that's really just sort of laying the context around the plan and getting people understanding sort of what it means when we talk about community safety and wellbeing, as well as some of the critical success factors around community safety and wellbeing planning. So it's just that brief little intro around the planning, then moving into what was our approach. So introducing the fact that there was a coordinating committee and sort of who was represented on the coordinating committee. I'm going to do a little intro to the advisory committee because you took a very different approach by making it sort of inclusive and participatory, and anyone who wanted to participate could participate. Talk about the 4 phases that we went through in terms of the planning for community safety and well-being, and then actually go into each of the 4 phases in more detail. So giving sort of that overview And so you'll see, I haven't done the first one yet, but phase 2 talks about what we did. So we did an inventory planning tables. This is what we inventoried. This is how many tables there were. We looked at local data and created a data package. Phase 3 was the community engagement piece. So we did a community consultation with the survey we did with the general public. We had a website. We also did a community organization consultation with a survey with all the community organizations. So 38 organizations, 18 different sectors. So just giving a sense of the process that we went through to actually collect information. And then I need to do a little bit around the plan development and how we actually develop the plan, which is working with each of the lead tables to develop the goals and objectives. So that just sort of summarizes that piece, that based on the data, the stakeholder engagement, and the input that you identified 5 sort of priority areas to focus on as part of the community safety well-being plan. So then the next section actually goes into the plan itself. So it talks about it being a 3-year plan, and that these are the 5 priorities of focus that have been identified, that you've put together a structure to lead the implementation of it. So we've got lead tables for each of the priority areas, as well as an integration table. So talk a little bit about those. And then what I see doing is taking each of these 5 and having 1 page per priority to sort of introduce and talk about it. And then you'll see it'll be consistent on each. Education skills development probably isn't a great one to look at because we're still waiting for their goals and objectives, but it would start with who's going to lead the priority area. So you'll see that's where we actually are identifying the action tables. So you'll see for education skills development that it will be the Elgin Workforce Development Network. Then I'm going to put a little bit around what we heard about education and skills development through the stakeholder engagement, as well as anything we heard sort of from data. So give a few highlights about it, and then show what will be the focus in that area over the course of the 3-year community safety wellbeing plan. So that one's not as fully developed as, let's go to housing security is. This is where I want you to see what groups have developed. So the action table for housing security is going to be the housing and homelessness action table. You'll see that this group has already, I did a facilitated session with them, and then they went back and did some review. So they have actually identified 2 goals over the course of the community safety and wellbeing plan. One is to increase housing security, stability, and access. The second goal is to decrease and prevent occurrences of chronic and episodic homelessness. So they've identified those based on sort of the work that we did and data we collected, and then they've identified a number of objectives in each of those goals. So you see around the range of housing options, increasing the supply of affordable housing, decreasing the centralized housing wait list, increasing capacity to maintain housing, and increasing affordable housing benefits is sort of the housing piece. And then around homelessness, they have a lot of objectives for that one. So rural homelessness being a focus, St. Thomas increasing awareness, need a period there, but St. Thomas and Elgin homelessness, enhancing service delivery, implementing solutions to family homelessness, people exiting institutions, enhancing connections for people experiencing homelessness, putting together a coordinated community response, decreasing barriers to accessing housing, decreasing the length of time a person experiences precarious housing or homelessness, and increasing safety for people experiencing homelessness. So that's what that group has identified. And the great thing about having an action table and them developing is they will actually take the goals and objectives and move those out into action plans and move forward with implementation. So they will become the drivers or the lead around making sure that the community safety and wellbeing plan gets implemented. So that's what that group has identified. For mental health and well-being, at this point in time, the action table is going to be the Elgin Mental Health and Addiction Network. We didn't meet with them to develop the goals and objectives. I met with a broader group who identified that they wanted to work on it. And then Dan Logie from CMHA took it to the Elgin Mental Health and Addiction Network this week. I'm still waiting to hear back from him. He took the goals and objectives to that group for some feedback and to confirm with them that they are interested in being the action table. So that group identified 2 goals as well. So the first one is to increase equitable access to mental health services and supports throughout Elgin County. And their second goal is to enhance people's wellness and sense of well-being. So looking at it from both ways, one from sort of more the acute mental health needs and the other piece is sort of that more general and universal piece around how do we make sure people are feeling well and have a sense of well-being. So you see again a whole range of objectives, some being around, because this is around access, using technology and digital literacy, developing new ways to access mental health services. So really building off the fact that in COVID, we've moved to virtual. So making sure that we do have sort of an array of way that people can access mental health services, expanding the use of health technology to include mental health services, increasing public awareness about available services and supports and how to access them, increasing coordination with service providers, increasing the number of supports, services, and mental health professionals, increasing access to affordable therapy, reducing current wait lists, and advocating and applying for increased funding. And then they made the link over to housing and increase the number of supporting housing options. So that's a piece around access. And then around people's wellness and sense of well-being, increasing public awareness about the importance of well-being. We've got pieces around self-care, coping, and available resources, increasing people's sense of connection to their community and each other. So really focusing on social isolation, increasing coordination of service providers to enhance wellness, and enhancing housing safety for individuals. So that was the mental health and well-being.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
On these, obviously we have goals and objectives, but where do we include the strategies as to how you're going to do that? Because I think that's an important piece for us to be able to identify it in our.
Yeah, so that's the next step is once you have the goals and objectives, is each of those action tables will move them out into strategies, which are action plans. Who asked that question? Was it the person on the phone?
No, I did. Zonk.
Oh, there you are. It doesn't look like your mouth is moving when you're just like, who asked that question? Yeah, so that's sort of the next step is that each of the action tables, once we get them all up and running, will take the goals and objectives and they will develop like an annual action plan. So year one, a community safety and well-being, if these are the objectives, what actions are we going to take to move them forward with? And that would then come into that integration table, which will begin to look at how is it moving into implementation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good question.
Just a quick follow-up question. In terms of the action plans and that, are organizations going to be assigning a specific position to be responsible for creating those? And could we tie that to this plan?
So the action tables are going to take the lead on it. I think the question to this group will be how, if at all, is there any support or resourcing going to happen for your action tables, or will they just be responsible for doing that? And then the integration table sort of manages or leads and make sure that that happens. But that's certainly the piece I've been talking about with the tables that are agreeing to be the action tables, is that they don't necessarily have to do everything. They have to lead it, which means they have to make sure that it's moving forward. But I think for sure as a group, we need to talk about, is there any resourcing required, maybe at the integration table level, to make sure that you still got that consistency across your tables and that they are moving forward.
Terrific, thanks. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Jennifer, it's Wendell. I've got a couple of comments if I can.
Yeah.
Three really. We'll start with the last one in terms of the mental health piece. When I look at that list of what the proposed sort of plans are, it seems to me that they're not hitting the head of the nail in terms of chronic and crisis situation that all of us have in our communities with the very evident homelessness and people who wanting to live on the streets with severe mental health and addictions. Those things to me look like all system things that are already in play. They're just rebundling, but there's no zeroing in on that crisis that we have on our streets right now. I might be missing something, but when I look at that, it just is like more of the same. Unless I'm wrong, I'm reading that wrong.
Yeah, so is there something you'd like to add or suggest? Be an
Well,
objective?
I think that table should be doing that, shouldn't they? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not the expert, but it doesn't, unless I'm reading it wrong, it just doesn't jump out at me that there's going to be emphasis on this, these encampments we're seeing in our communities and the impacts on our main streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all system things that we could have all written, I think, but maybe I'm not seeing that right.
Yeah, and I wonder if, because they've got the goal, which is certainly around chronic and episodic homelessness. I'm wondering if it's because they're still at such a high level, you're not seeing the action piece, but really, yeah, I don't know. Like, are you thinking that it's the objectives are too, use the word, bland or bureaucratic versus sort of?
Yeah, maybe I'm being like for the last 2 years we've been on the phone, in the meetings with the sort of the mental health addictions folks, and we've never seen yet once an action plan that puts resources on the street. So
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading this wrong, but that's my concern, that we're just going to have more of the same instead of we're going to really be agents of change in this thing.
Jennifer, oh, sorry. Could I say something, Jennifer?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
It's Mary. I have to say, I agree with what Wendell's saying.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Like, some of the statements are just like they're reinventing the wheel type thing. Like, a lot of these statements, I'm pretty sure all of us at this meeting, we've all said these exact same statements. And I see where Wendell's coming from, that we need something a little more defined, I guess. So we know it's out there. We all know these problems exist, but really, what are we going to do? So I have to say, I agree with what Wendell just said.
And this is I was holding it back, but I'll say exactly the same thing. These aren't really aspirational at all. These are, hey, here's what we're already doing. Why do we go through this exercise if we're going to end up at the same place as we started at? We have today's problems working on yesterday's solutions, and we need to move the solutions into today also. If there isn't a goal to remove mental health from the street, or to remove addictions from our main streets, why are we going forward? As the people from addictions have already shared with me, they have a great website. And that would be the place people could go, I guess, right? But that's not what's solving the problem today. So I agree with what Wendell said also.
So what I'm hearing, it could be across the three, which is your mental health, your homelessness, and your substance use and addictions, is really seeing something about getting more resources out on the street, which is like more of an outreach piece. Would that capture it more?
Well, and it's not about getting them out on the street. I don't want to argue minutia, but it's not about getting them out on the street. It is clearly about quit doing what you're already doing, because that's not really working, or modify what you're already doing into something new. But I think, as Wendell shared, this is fairly, if I'd asked someone from CMHA or Addictions Ontario or any of those groups a year ago, what do you do? I would have got this list. I'm sorry, I'm pulling my hair out, because what's on this list isn't fixing anything. So can we reach for the sky and maybe not get there? I keep saying excellence may not be achievable, but we can do a whole lot more good if we do something a little bit different.
Jennifer, if I may, and just I got two plans in front of me that I've been kind of going through as you've been taking us through your document here, one from Thunder Bay and one from Halton. And just reading those documents and how they've laid out their key strategies and action items, action plan. So is it your plans, and maybe we just need some further communication and articulation from yourself, is it your plans? So for example, increase this bullet point here, increase the number of support services and mental health professionals available, i.e. therapists, psychiatrists. So would an action item be for CMHA or addiction services Thames Valley to put more boots on the ground? Would that be an action item that's going to fall out of this objective to narrow down exactly what we need in our community to address the concerns I have, we all have, the mayor, Wendell, and all of us on this chat here? Is that your plan? Just maybe we just need a better understanding of the next step.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of grappling with in my head, is it that this is still pretty high level, right? Like objectives are more about what you're going to focus on, but not specifically how you're going to do it, which are the actions or the tactics that you would see to actually make it happen. So
that's kind of the way I'm reading this. It's kind of like we're at 30,000 feet right now, but we need to get it closer to the ground level. And how are we going to, what are we going to do to get it closer to the ground level to address our concerns?
Yeah, which to me would say sort of what Wendell and Joe and Mary both said, is that, gosh, we don't want you to increase the number of support services and mental health professionals the way that you've always done it. We want you to think differently because it's not working.
Right.
So you need to try different tactics. Like you say, if you
Right.
keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results, versus we still want to increase access to it, but we need to start to think about the tactics or strategies or actions that we're taking and doing things differently.
If I could, I see a better objective: remove mental health crisis from the street. I mean, that's still 30,000 feet, but it has a far more aspirational objective, or service addictions at street level. I don't see it, right?
Yeah.
And sure, increase access to affordable therapy may accomplish that. I don't think it would, but it's a great high level. But I think we can be high level, but also a little more prescriptive of what today's problem is. What, and we had many town hall meetings and open communication about what today's problem is, right? And I don't think you'd find it too many people that didn't agree mental health on the street, mental health crisis on the street was the biggest issue. There's a bunch of others. Yes, there's still alcoholism in our communities and some other stuff that has to do with that, but the biggest crisis. So something that is far more descriptive, like what you've just written, right? If that's an objective, now we can make goals and action plans that go, how do we remove mental health crisis from the street? If we say the same thing about addiction, then that is also, now let's let the rest follow. So
how do people feel about that as an objective? Like we put that right at the top. It's pretty bold. I like that.
Yeah, I don't think you can remove mental health crisis from the streets, but you can certainly reduce it. You'll never eliminate that problem just because some people have they have no interest in leaving the streets. So if we can reduce it and then identify through our action plan the percentages that perhaps would be our target, reduce that number of crises off the streets, I think that would be more reachable or more attainable, I guess, than trying to eliminate it altogether, because you'll never do that.
Well, and Zonk, I don't disagree. It may not happen, but I say to ask greater than you might accomplish, rather than now we've got it down to reduce. I take one off the street, we've done. All right. You see where what I'm saying? It's not the semantics. I agree that we're really attempting to reduce, but if we're talking about removing the crisis from the street, then we should say that's our ultimate goal. And if we achieve the very good instead of perfection, I'm pretty happy. But if we simply say remove, then, or simply say reduce, well, then one is a reduction. So I agree with what you're saying. This is a tough thing, and we're not getting anywhere. So I'm trying to be shorter in my words of how we will measure whether we got success or not. So, but I do agree, Zonk, with what you're saying. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, fair enough. And our action plan could be reduce it or by 20% or whatever that number is,
Yeah.
but at least then we have a target because
Yeah.
it is what it is. I mean, I agree that you'll never eliminate it, and one reduction doesn't necessarily mean success. So it is what it is.
Yeah, maybe it's just the way, I know in policing, and just on what Zonk is saying there, just the way we develop our strategic plans. I can see that, I understand this, because this is the way we would develop it. And I know, just like Zonk said, the action item itself would be to remove mental health crisis from the streets through how we're going to do this. So maybe that's just where we have a little bit of a disconnect how we do things in policing. Because I relate to this, and this is how we develop our business plans. And then we take these objectives and we turn them into action items to accomplish what the mayor is saying right here.
Yeah. Sally, did you want to say something?
Jennifer, yeah, I just, like, this is supposed to be a 3-year plan too. So I do think it's very important we set an objective on that one as to how much we hope to accomplish in those 3 years, knowing there's no way we can get it all removed at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Mary, did you want to say something? No. So are people okay with adding that as an objective? Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Wendell, for catching that. Speaking what other people were thinking, so it's good.
Sorry, I had 2 other points I wanted to raise.
Go ahead.
If I can. And I'm sorry, I'm going backwards a little bit. Can you just remind me, when you speak about the housing piece and also the employment piece, who specifically are the groups that we've been speaking to and are going to take ownership for these things?
So Housing and Homelessness Action Table is actually chaired by Danielle Nelson from your shop.
Okay.
And it's the housing, they've been meeting on an ongoing basis, though not much recently. So they have reconvened that table to take the lead on this. And then the education and skills development is the Elgin Workforce Development Network. I'd have to get a list of who's on it, but we've supplemented it with, so it'd be employment and literacy and education providers, but that's the Workforce Planning and Development Board, their network in Elgin.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? So far? All right, let me keep going. Public safety. There is no public safety table. There is a Safe Communities committee or coalition that is a sort of a subcommittee of the chamber. And I did speak to the chair of that, but she felt that this was a lot broader than the work that they do in their committee. So she is going to sit on this table to make sure we have links with that group. But this is actually going to be a new public safety action table. So we did have a group come together and work on it. So
yeah, Jennifer, my point on that would be that all 3 police services will have to sort of identify their own objectives through our business planning that we do, like a 3-year cycle. And certainly I think my issues in Aylmer are totally different than Chris's in St. Thomas. So some of the objectives are going to have to be specific to the community that we police.
yeah.
And I would identify it through our operational planning specific to crime trends. That's in our 3-year business cycle, and plug those in there with the goals identified, obviously objectives, and then action plan. And then ultimately annually we do our annual report where we identify our successes and failures and what we need to do to get into the successes of that operational plan. So
I'll send it to you and get you to review it, because Chris was involved in the group to develop them, and was Mike was
Mike.
too. Yeah. So I'll send it to you, Zonky. You take a look just to make sure it's capturing some of your stuff if we need to add some more into it.
Okay.
So yeah, who's gonna speak? Anyone else? Okay. So we got a lot of goals under public safety. So the first one is to increase traffic safety, and got a number of things there about road safety programs, decreasing the impact of DUIs, distracted driving and speeding, increasing the use of seat belts, increasing bicycle lanes, improving and increasing the number of sidewalks and crosswalks. So that's all about traffic safety. We have another goal around feelings of personal safety. So if you remember, especially through our general public survey, there was a lot of commentary from the public around St. Thomas and downtown St. Thomas as a safe place. So promote it as a safe place, increase visits to downtown St. Thomas, reduce victimization of people as a result of property crime. And we've got a goal around encouraging youth to actively participate in building a healthier community. So building stronger relationships with youth, using holistic strategies and a community-based multi-partner approach to encourage youth in making good, responsible decisions in order to avoid criminal activity. So it's a youth focus. And then the final goal is around partnerships and more collaboration. So increase collaborative efforts to address social issues and root causes, increase the street outreach presence of community partners, enhance and increase community engagement and integrated response models and victim assistance, educate the public about appropriate resources, services other than police services, and increase awareness about human trafficking. So those are the 4 overall goals. So really focusing on traffic, personal safety, youth, and partnerships, and then the specific objectives underneath them. The final area is substance use and addiction. So right now there is, I don't know what you're gonna call it, a process that's been underway for probably a year, maybe a little bit more than a year. It's being led by the Central Community Health Center and Southwest Public Health Unit. And they have a group called, and they're developing Elgin Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy. So you'll see that I have put them as the lead. Though at some point I've had discussions with the Ontario Health team about both mental health and substance use and addiction and whether these might tuck under them at some point, but at this point it's sitting here. This group is in the midst of a process, which means they've done a lot of data collection, they've done a huge amount of consultation. They're right now in the process of developing sort of their recommendations and a strategy report. They'll have some draft recommendations and strategies by the summer, but then they're going to take them out for community consultation with having a strategy report by the end of the year. So because that work is ongoing, you'll see that this priority area is a bit different than others because I don't have specific goals and objectives yet because they're still developing them. So this is a bit more high level, saying the focus, this is the vision that they have. That they're developing a strategy report to move toward achieving the vision, and it includes 4 pillars. So they're looking at prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and justice. And they've got a number of guiding themes that they're going to use to develop the recommendations and strategies that will go in the strategy report. So this part of the report will not be fleshed out until they're actually have completed their work, because they're undergoing a process and we can't I can't push them along in their timelines because they've got a process in place. So this one is a little more high level. It just said this is the vision and these are sort of the 4 pillars that will be included, but will have to be further defined as this group moves forward with its process. So that's sort of that. So that gives you sort of the 1 pager on each of the priority areas. And then I'm going to suggest that we do a page sort of talking about moving forward, and then if you want to do some acknowledgements at the end as well.
If I can just jump back for a moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each of the pillars, and Wendell asked a question I was going to ask, like under skills and employment, we have the Workplace Development Board, and under the addiction side, we have the Drug and Alcohol Strategy Group. right? Is it those groups, the tables responsibility to be asking the provincial government for the funding to accomplish what they're saying it needs to be accomplished? Or does it all end up in a great big pile at the main table saying, well, here's all our strategies. We're finished our safety plan, right? But now we need to implement it.
No.
I just don't know at which point. I've asked this a couple of other times. We keep kind of designing work for other people. Great, right? If it's truly their job, then I would see them do it. But we're also adding a very costly plan from the implementation side, not from the generation side. And so I have asked about, I know this is a provincial request that we do this safety plan, but has the province said, here's what we'll do about funding your priorities? Right. So I'm not certain how much further we really want to get till we get that type of advice back. I know that as we move forward individually on housing, we kind of get a vision of where we want to be, for example, as a municipality, and then we go out and ask, is this possible through the CMHC or through the province or through the feds? And once we get a somewhat affirmative from them, yes, then we'll continue the planning. Well, we're at the point here on this one where we've done some fantastic planning and really recognized the safety and security of our communities, but I'm not certain without some at least nodding or winking from the provincial government that many of this stuff actually moves forward without it becoming the bill of the local municipalities.
Yeah, to me, it's the action tables will have to look at, can they use existing resources and sort of reallocate or reshift based on priorities in the plan? And if not, like you said, it's advocating for more funding to actually do it. Because you can only work with what you have. The question is sort of how creative can you be, and or are service providers reallocating their resources? It's good point. Anyone else want to talk to that one?
I
Jennifer,
totally agree. Sorry, go ahead, Wendell.
sorry, Chief. This might be jumping about 2 steps ahead, but what I think what would be integral to this report when it finally gets tabled is that included within it is some sort of official sign off or endorsement from each one of these tables. So to signify that they've seen and they understand and they're going to stand up to the plate relating to what's contained in this report coming from each of those tables. So it's not just our stuff, but it's endorsed backwards through them.
Yeah, I mean, they've all developed it, so I'm assuming that, but I can go ask for an official commitment to it.
I totally agree. We need some ownership to this to ensure that any of these action items that we put into place move forward. And I know Wendell and I have talked about this right from the onset of this new requirement under the Community Safety and Policing Act that we have to do this. But my biggest worry, and I know this is Wendell's as well, that we're going to complete this document, we're going to submit it, and it's going to sit on a desk somewhere, and someone's going to tick a box and say, hey, we got this done, let's move on. And what are we going? We're going to be in the same, spinning our wheels like we are right now with the issues our communities are facing.
Jennifer?
Mm-hmm.
It's Mary. I have to say, again, I agree. Is this just a feel-good policy? The thing is, we've spent hours, just this group, not to mention all the other groups and yourself, Jennifer, and we've worked really hard on this. And as Chris just mentioned, is it just going to sit someplace? Is this just a feel-good policy where they tick the box and say, oh yeah, they did it, but now who cares? We're not going to do anything about it. The thing is, they're all great initiatives. And again, what Joe said, it costs a lot of money. And if I'm going to be really blunt, if it was that easy, this stuff would have all been done anyways, because if we had the budgets, our police services, they know this stuff's going on. If we had the budgets, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be at the stage it is right now. And if we had help, and believe me, I'm sure every politician that's at this meeting has reached out to other politicians in the federal and provincial government and said, hey, we need more money. Like there's so many problems. And I mean, we can only go so far with this. And what I want to see out of this is I want to see actual action. I want to see clear and concise information that's usable by everybody in our communities, by the police, by the politicians, by our residents, not just something that none of us even know where it went. Like we're sitting here today. Are we going to know where this policy and this documentation is in a year? So I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly, but we've really got to be very clear what we want and how we're going to get there. And I know we have to reach for the skies so that we can get something done, but we've got to be reasonable about this too. So, and I will also say a lot of these initiatives, and I'm going to give St. Thomas a plug here. I was in St. Thomas the other day getting my vaccination at a local pharmacy. So I was sitting in downtown waiting for my turn, and they do have people on the street helping homeless people. I seen a man and a lady. They were approaching all the homeless people, giving them something to eat. I was quite impressed. I mean, there are boots on the ground. Some of this stuff is being done. It's just people aren't being acknowledged for what they're doing. So that's my take on it.
I'm wondering if in a couple of things, if in that moving forward section of the report, I put in a piece around adequate resources and funding to actually move forward with implementation. And then I'm also wondering if when we take the report to the councils, if Julie does like a staff report, which is the cover report, one of the recommendations is actually that you advocate to the province around additional resources. Because if you submit this document to them and just send the document, they're not going to read it. Like they're not going to get to the moving forward section and say, oh, they want some more resources. But I think if there's a clear recommendation that goes with the staff report, you know, saying we send a letter to the province noting these are the key challenges in our community that we require additional funding, like you actually make it a very specific action, at least then you're on record that you do require additional resources and that you do have some key challenges and pressures and issues in your community around community safety and well-being. I think if we tried sort of those two prongs at it, at least you're letting them know. What people think, is that a?
Hi, Andy. Now you can see me.
Hi.
No, I generally agree, but my experience is almost that with the province or the federal government, that they might be more prone to fund capital rather than operational increased costs. So I don't know if there are brick and mortar things that we can do, or you know, it's the people resourcing. I think they'll come back and say that's going to be on the county levy for operational. I mean, some you do get a portion of health and social services that is funded out of that, but I don't think that they would create new specific positions just for us without having a broader program for the rest of Ontario type thing.
Yeah, you know, I agree. I think the request for funding isn't necessarily municipal funding, but it's sector funding. So maybe there's more money needs to be going into mental health, or more money needs to be going into housing or substance use and addiction. Like it's around those key issues and challenges, not necessarily that you as municipalities need additional funding. And I mean, another key piece, which I was talking to another group, is that especially coming out of COVID and the pandemic, you've got the province and municipalities really focused on an economic recovery, but I think we need to think about community safety and well-being being part of that recovery effort as well, which is the mental health. It is the substance use and addiction. It is like all of those pieces are so interconnected. So it could be, because that's where I think we need to push the province too, is as they think about COVID recovery, how do we think more broadly beyond economic recovery? And is there funding that comes to continue to help communities around community safety and well-being? I think it's a great alignment with that piece as well. So that could certainly be part of that recommendation. Okay, let me go back.
If I could, just one
Yeah,
more
go ahead,
quick
Joe.
on that one. Have we connected with AMO or Roma or FCM from an Ontario point of view on this project? Every community is doing this, right? And new guidelines and new timelines have been set. I wouldn't mind having some discussion with those groups. I'll be attending AMO, but have we heard anything, I guess, Julia Wendell, perhaps, have we heard anything else from other municipalities or other counties that are writing a plan like this as to whether it was in their mind a paper exercise or an actual action plan, and what the province has said about it?
I know a couple municipalities that have put in municipal dollars to implement, like not necessarily to implement programs and services, but to actually provide sort of the backbone infrastructure to implement it.
I think for
Exactly. That's kind of where I have a little bit of an issue with municipalities having to
Yeah.
fund, when a lot of these issues, maybe 75, 80% of these issues that we are facing in our communities are health related.
Yeah.
And we need the Ministry of Health at the provincial level to step up and help fund some of these issues that we're having with addictions, mental health, the justice system. It's an entire system breakdown that we're experiencing, and it's way above the municipal level.
Yeah.
I'll take the bill for housing. That is a municipal responsibility along with the province and the feds, and we are doing it. And we're addressing as much as we can from a housing point of view. But every time I open up the budget for my community, there is no line for healthcare. There just is not. And 3/4 of what we're talking about in a public safety plan is healthcare, whether it's addictions, mental health, or even policing, which involves our courts. And the well is only so deep, and we balance every year. We don't run deficits. So it'd be great. I mean, honestly, I'd love to find the whatever number of millions it would take to work on addictions and mental health crisis in my community. I really, truly would. I mean, it's frustrating me that we can't, but to make plans that won't be implemented is maybe more painful than trying to find the money right now to stop the mental health crisis or addictions crisis we currently have.
Mayor Joe, to your earlier point, through my lens, I've not seen any chatter really whatsoever through AMO or anything relative to this work that's underway, or from any other community, really, nothing. And I don't, maybe Julie wants to comment on that, but just before I forget this thought, Jennifer, at some point, could you just comment? I think you had some reach out to the consultants who are doing the Ontario Health Team stuff, and maybe comment a little bit at some point about your dialogue with them and how this all connects.
Yeah, so I've talked to the consultant 3 times for that's helping the Elgin Ontario Health Team, and then did a brief presentation to the Ontario Health Team at their meeting. I'm gonna say in April. Was it April, Julie? It was sometime recently. The Ontario Health Team is still in the process. They've identified their year 1 focus, which is on, what is it on? Pulmonary.
COPD.
Pulmonary, something that health related, which doesn't necessarily align with any of our priority areas. Though mental health is certainly, I think, second on the list. That's why I said there may be an opportunity to begin to align with their work. So I went to talk about the priority areas and sort of how we were looking at existing tables to take the lead, and planted some seeds with that table, as well as with the consultant, that as the Ontario Health Team continues to move forward and develop its governance structure and implementation structure, that there could be an opportunity for that team to become the lead around mental health and around substance use and addiction, because they certainly align with the work that group is doing, though they're still in process of developing what that structure looks like. So I just wanted to make sure that they knew what we were doing, so that if there was a possibility to align some of the action tables from community safety and well-being, they may tuck into the Ontario Health Team going into the future once they get up and running. So there is that opportunity as well, which I think is great, because that's a resourced, well, more resource table, because it is a health table. It's in process, in process. So we'll do some piece around the resourcing. We'll poke and try to make it more apparent, or sort of articulated in the report and in the staff reports around recommendations. Let me go back. Do you want a message from somebody at the beginning of the document or not? And if yes, from whom would that message come from?
I do see in the other plans that there is messaging from the political leaders of our communities. So I throw that out there.
So would it be like from the warden and the mayors? When I say warden and mayors, would it be the mayors of St. Thomas and Elmer?
I think that seems appropriate from my lens.
I agree.
Yeah, okay, so warden and the 2 mayors.
And they're kind of writing it on behalf of the, like this committee,
Yeah,
I would
you
say,
could
like
start
the
it
work.
that way, like, you know, on behalf of the, yeah. Okay. All right. Any other final thoughts? Did you like the flow? Like, did the flow of the document work? So what I'm going to do, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to continue to sort of build out the draft content. Once I've got a first draft of just the content, I'll send it out to you again. So I want your eyes on it. And then Carolyn, I'm going to be working with Carolyn to pretty it up. She's going to be our design. So don't worry about sort of, does it look good? Because right now it's just a word processing document. So really I'll be looking for feedback on the content. And then I'll be working with Carolyn and we'll get it designed into a nicer, visually appealing document. But yeah, I probably have something for you in the next couple of days that I'll pop out to you. And I'll also, in terms of it going approved through municipal councils, does it go through all of your lower tier? It'll have to go through all the lower tiers, correct? Okay, so we'll have to work with you on getting the dates for council meetings and making sure we're getting it on the agendas once we have a document. Maybe I can work with you on that, Carolyn, too, in terms of making sure we're all lined up for that. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, Wendell?
Well, I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is technically possible, but it would be good if there was an hour set aside at some point in time where any of our municipal councillor friends could join on to a Teams meeting or something, and then maybe Jennifer, you provide an overview of this thing before the actual individual reports go to council, and then police service boards too, so that people can see it, some sort of high level overview, and prior to the reports going to council.
Yeah, so it's not like a cold presentation. Yeah. Okay, we'll work on that. Any other thoughts?
Jennifer, I just want to say I certainly appreciate all the work that you've done and your patience, especially here today. I think you got to see our frustrations with what's happening in our community, and you took it all in stride. So kudos to you for that. And maybe once you're done here, you can go to the provincial government and see what their strategic plan is, what they're going to do for us.
So true. Huh?
Anyhow, thank you.
And I agree with what the chief said. Look, we're not, it's not us against you, it's us against the system we're trying to design. Somehow the crisis in our communities is causing all of us to be a little more bitter. That's normal. And I speak to the chief about this a lot, that this is about us wanting to accomplish. I just know that we're all at the absolute end of planning. Let's do some accomplishments. So sorry, I do admit to being grumpy Joe today. So
that's okay. You all have a right to be grumpy. I agree. It's like, I think the province asked you to do some planning. They didn't give you money to do the planning. They didn't give you money to implement it. It's an interesting process. Yeah, that's why I say let's use as many sort of levers as you have as municipalities to sort of poke at them around that. As you're talking, Joe, I think maybe we title it, "This is a crisis." That's the title of your report. Like, don't make it like, oh, this is a nice community safety well-being plan. But how do you actually catch the attention, right? of the province around it. Any other final thoughts? Yeah. Thanks for your feedback today. That was really helpful. It'll help me in terms of sort of fleshing out the content a little bit more. And as I said, in the next couple of days, I'll send you out a draft. And if you can put your eyes on it, and just to make sure the language, it's highlighting. So language is key. Like, I like how you changed that one objective. So make sure it's got sort of that bold piece that you're looking for in it in terms of the language as well, especially when I get into that moving forward section. Maybe if you have some good language, that may be helpful. So I'll send it out to you to take a peek, and then I'm going to work with Carolyn, and we'll make sure we're starting to tee up getting onto the council agendas to begin to move it through that way as well. So thank you, all of you, for all of your input. Always helpful. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.